Welcome back. I have here in my hand something that is nothing short of a miracle. It's a jar of jelly beans. How is that a miracle? That's what we're talking about here in part 3, the wisdom of crowds. How many jelly beans are in this jar? Do you know? I don't either, and I'm not going to bother counting them. But what if there was a way we could find out without having to count? You've probably seen this before. You pay 50 cents or $1 or whatever, and you make your guess as to how many jelly beans you think there are in the jar. Lots of other people do too, and the person who comes closest wins a prize. Yeah, it's a fundraiser. Here's the thing. It might have just been a fundraiser, or it might have been a scientific experiment. So what you have is a jar of jelly beans, and people can see the jar and everything about it. It's this size, it's this shape. The jelly beans are pretty much a uniform size, and they can guess how many there are. Well, if you get enough people guessing, let's say 300 to 400 people, you take all of their guesses and you average them out. And then you find something incredible. The average of all their guesses will be closer to the real figure than any individual guess. It sounds incredible, but it works. Now, the way this got started was something called Galton's ox, named for Francis Galton, Charles Darwin's cousin. He once attended a fair where a live ox was presented, and people would try to guess its weight. After everyone had made their guesses, the ox was butchered and weighed. Before then, no one knew how much the ox weighed. The person who came closest won a prize. Galton was a curious and adventurous sort. He was, after all, the person who figured out that all of our fingerprints are unique. He looked at the winning guess among all the others, and he found out that the winning guess was the median. That means it was exactly in the middle. From the closest guess, just as many people guessed higher as guessed lower. And he thought that was pretty incredible. The middlemost estimate expresses the vox populi, every other estimate being condemned as too low or too high by a majority of the voters. The vox populi was in this case 9 pounds or 0.8% of the whole weight too high. He published this curious result in the 7 March 1907 issue of Nature. Later, he acknowledged the findings of others who looked at his data and found that the average, the mean rather than the median, of everybody's guesses was only 1 pound off of the correct value. It was so close. And ever since then, all sorts of research has been done showing how people in the aggregate, which is what we're concerned about in economics, know more than any one individual. And this includes people who are experts. Butchers, farmers, large animal vets. They were all there at this fair. They were all making their guesses. They have experience with these things, and they couldn't even get their individual guesses as close as the overall average guess of everyone at the fair. So if we need to know the number of jelly beans in this jar, and we can't count them for whatever reason, all we need is enough people giving it their best guess, and we can come really close to the actual number. Believe it or not, it actually works. This is called the wisdom of crowds, and has been verified again and again and again. Somehow, as a whole, we act as if we have better information than even the best of us individually. Or a more accurate way of it might be, the result encompasses the sum total of the knowledge and experience that all of us have, far more than any one individual or even group of individuals. We all have incomplete knowledge, but if we're all incentivized to make the best guess we can, we'll use whatever knowledge we do have, and many of us will help fill in the gaps of others' ignorance. Some of us will guess low, some will guess high, but all of us guessing together means that in the aggregate we'll come as close as the sum of our knowledge and experience will allow. Here we have Alice, Bob, and Carol. Alice knows A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J. Bob knows H, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P, Q, R, S. And Carol knows Q, R, S, T, U, V, W, X, Y, Z. Put them together and they can reconstruct the alphabet. But here's the thing about the wisdom of crowds. They don't have to come together. They don't even have to know each other. There just has to be some way for the information they have to get into the economy. So let's say they're all making decisions based on whether or not D comes before E. Alice is the only one with knowledge that it does, so that's how she'll behave.
Bob and Carol will guess, and they might guess wrong. In the absence of any information one way or the other, they might well guess 50-50. So let's say Bob acts as if D comes before E, and Carol acts as if E comes before D. We now have 2/3 of the market acting as if D comes before E, which of course it does. Carol, observing this, will likely end up behaving this way too. Bob and Carol both get the benefit of this knowledge, even if they don't get the knowledge itself.
We all have incomplete knowledge, but if we're all incentivized to make the best guess we can, we'll use whatever knowledge we do have, and many of us will help fill in the gaps of others' ignorance. Some of us will guess low, some will guess high, but all of us guessing together means that, in the aggregate, we'll come as close as the sum of our knowledge and experience will allow. Now, they've experimented with different ways of biasing this. For example, I saw a study where they did the jelly bean experiment, but they were trying to bias people to guess too high. And what they did was say, okay, you can win $100, but you also get an extra $50 for a larger number. So if the total number of jelly beans was 2,000, you get $50 more than if the total were 1,000. But you still had to guess accurately to win the money. What they were trying to do was to get people biased to making higher guesses just out of wishful thinking. They couldn't. When you averaged out everyone's guess, it was still the case that the average was more accurate than anyone's individual guess. In fact, the only way that's been found to throw off the guesses is to just cheat outright. Take a big bowl of styrofoam or something, stick it in the middle of the jar of jelly beans so that it looks like there are more jelly beans than there really are. Aside from that, they haven't found any way of biasing this to force the wisdom of crowds to go wrong. Recently, a lot of attention has been brought to a market activity known as prediction markets. The idea is that people bet on what is or is not going to happen. Sort of like betting on a horse race, except they bet on what chance so-and-so has of winning the presidential election, for example. Participants put their own money on the line and stand to lose if they're wrong, so they have the incentive to be risk-averse. They'll only participate if they have a pretty good idea and the amount they bet will correlate to their level of confidence. One of the most famous was Intrade. From its founding in 1999 until government shut it down as an illegal gambling site in 2013, they proved to be astoundingly accurate, much more so than news polls. In 2008, they predicted Obama would win the presidency with 365 electoral votes. In reality, he won with 364. They were only off by 1. In 2012, they once again correctly predicted Obama's re-election, and the only state they got wrong was Florida. They had similar success in congressional races. Well, obviously there's been a lot of study of this, so why does it work, and when does it not work? When does it go awry? Well, it turns out there are 4 things that you need to do in order for the wisdom of crowds to be really effective. The first thing is you need a diversity of opinion and knowledge. You need people coming from different walks of life with different biases, different experiences. The more different, the more diverse, the better. And this flies in the face of what you see people talking about. For example, the stock market. They might talk about insider trading. Oh, it's not fair that people have inside information. It's not fair that some people have more information than others. But that's the only way the wisdom of crowds can work. That's the only way this information can be used to help set the proper price. If you remove people from the market who have certain information, their information cannot affect the price mechanism, and everyone loses out as a result. The wisdom of crowds depends on a diversity of knowledge, opinion, and information. Cutting out any of that hurts us all. The second thing you need is independence. Everyone has to make their own independent guesses and not be unduly influenced by anything else. So if someone comes and makes their guess for jelly beans and they can see everyone else's previous guesses, they might be biased by them. It's kind of like that last guy on The Price is Right when they call him down from the audience. They have the 4 contestants and they come to the last guy, and the last guy is basing his decision on what everyone else did and whether he thinks it's higher or lower or whatever. And he would give a completely different answer, most likely, than he would if he were asked first. So that biases it. So you need complete, independent guesses with no kind of collusion or collaboration, or you can have it on a small enough scale, but not a significant amount. The third is, it needs to be decentralized, so they can't be a part of the same group or hierarchy or authority. And this is a big problem, not only with government departments, but also large corporations. That's why so many corporations diversify and compartmentalize and make subsidiaries. They actually get better results than if they were all managed together. The fourth is aggregation. There has to be some way of combining everyone's opinions to get a result. In the jelly bean experiment, you're converging on a number, and that number is the actual number of jelly beans. In the economy, you're converging on a number, and that number is the price of the good or service. Remember in part 1 when I said that prices seek equilibrium, but we don't really know where it is? In a free market, the wisdom of crowds and the price mechanism help keep prices at least close to where they should be, the equilibrium point of supply and demand as estimated by the best of everyone's collective knowledge.
So you need all four of these. You need diversity of opinion and knowledge, you need independence, you need decentralization, and you need aggregation.
Now, how can this go wrong? Well, there are a few different ways. One is that if everyone's too homogeneous, if you don't have the diversity. If everyone is in the same culture, or the same religion, or the same background, then depending on what you're doing, they might be biased in the same direction. Another is, it could be centralized. If everyone's from the same authority, or part of the same hierarchical structure, it won't work. Both of those things allow us to distinguish a crowd in this context from a mob. The mob people don't trust, and rightly so. But that's not what we're talking about here. The mob is exactly what we don't need, centralized, homogeneous, and working together directly. We need decentralized, diverse, and independent for the wisdom of crowds to work. Now, as I said earlier, you need to have that diversity of knowledge, but it can't be too divided. It can't be the ball of styrofoam stuck in the bowl of jelly beans that only some people know about. That's the third thing that can go wrong. There can't be any kind of division of information that leads people to the wrong conclusion. And that usually means some kind of fraud or something that's preventing all this information from getting together and working properly, like a government regulation. But it can be more subtle than that. In the early 2000s, the Federal Reserve was pushing down interest rates to make loans cheaper. At the same time, the federal government was encouraging banks to give more mortgages to lower income people. What they thought they were doing was helping more people afford homes. What they were really doing was sticking in that ball of styrofoam. These manipulations, and many more that we don't have time to go into here, made it appear as though there were more demand for housing than there really was. So both the amount of housing and the sale price soared. It got to the point where people were giving up being doctors and lawyers to become realtors. Ordinary people were buying homes just to flip them, turn around and sell them at a higher price, even though they'd made no improvements to the property whatsoever. It was a bubble. A bubble happens when there's a tendency towards malinvestment. That means that more money is being invested in an industry than there should have been, at the expense of other industries where the money would have been better put. Just as the styrofoam makes it look like there are more jelly beans in the jar than there really are, the low interest rates and easy credit made it look like the housing market was bigger than it was. If they had been right, if the demand for housing really had been that great, then everything would have been fine. But it wasn't. Government manipulation in the market resulted in false signals being sent. Resources were being put into building housing when they would have been better spent elsewhere, and when it all hit the fan, we got the Great Recession. The fourth thing that can go wrong with the wisdom of crowds is if people are too imitative. If they're just copying the same methods that other people are using, then obviously if those methods are flawed, they'll tend to be flawed in the same direction. So if people get it into their heads that say BPA is harmful, when it isn't, then they'll start demanding products be made without it. And they won't be counterbalanced by a sufficient number of people demanding more products with BPA. And the fifth is, if it's too emotional. People need to try to make a good, considered opinion on whatever it is, how many jelly beans are in a jar, or even a big economic decision like, what's this stock going to do, or should I buy this house? If enough people make their decisions too emotionally, it's not going to be reliable.
So these are the things you want to avoid. You don't want people to be too homogeneous, centralized, divided through fraud and regulations. imitative, or emotional. The more the incentive structure of an economy results in these things, the worse off everyone will be.
The wisdom of crowds is a big way that the market works, and the biggest way it can go wrong is with government intervention. We discussed a specific example earlier. As a more general example, you have the market trying to head towards total employment and total long-run output. But a lot of people don't trust the free market. They managed to get the government on their side, and so they created the Federal Reserve. The idea is that the Federal Reserve is made up of people who are knowledgeable, who are very skilled in this, who have studied this, so they know more about what's going on, and they can anticipate where total output is going to go, and go beyond it so they can lower interest rates and control inflation and avoid the boom and bust cycles. But the truth is, no one knows what any of that is. If you doubt this, just look at what happens whenever Apple releases a new iPhone. People line up all around the block to go and buy it, only for the store to run out early while people are still in line. All of those people were willing to buy the iPhone at its initial price. You don't think Apple would have loved to sell it to them? But the fact is, there's just no way for Apple to know how many iPhones to send where at any given time. Well, if Apple, the leader in their industry, can't even get the information they need about the demand of their own flagship product, how is the government or the Federal Reserve going to do that for all products in all industries economy-wide? No one knows what the total output is in the economy at any given time. Not Janet Yellen, not anyone in the Federal Reserve, not anyone in the big financial markets, not Warren Buffett. No one knows where that is. We rely on the wisdom of crowds to be able to zero in on that. And so, when the federal government tries to figure it out, they're going to get it wrong, and they're just going to make things worse. They're going to destroy the diversity and independence that we rely on for the wisdom of crowds to work. Their regulations are going to force players in the market to be imitative, and all of the soapboxing and punditry is just going to make people emotional whenever anyone stands up and says that it just ain't so. We'll see examples of this in Part 4. Every time there's been a problem with the economy, something like this was going on. So, learn from the jelly beans. Leave it to the market. It won't be perfect, utopia is not an option, but it'll be a lot closer than government or any other group or organization could ever possibly get, even with their best lucky guess. Well, that's Part 3, the wisdom of crowds. Although I will give you a different answer to the question, how many jelly beans are in this jar? One less than there was before. We'll see you later for Part 4. Why do some people think they can help the poor by destroying their jobs? Why do they think they can help disaster areas by keeping supplies out? Why do they think they can make healthcare cheaper by reducing the amount of it? Crazy but true, in Part 4, we talk about price controls. We'll see you later for Part 4. I really don't like jelly beans. How many jelly beans are in this jar? One less than there was. Oh. Yeah. It's coffee flavored. Oh God. Ugh. Who thought a coffee flavored jelly bean was a good idea? Oh.